as we bring in our guy, Mike McAllister here, Mike. And, yet another big recruiting weekend, huh? It never seems to stop here with Fran.
No, he is, I think the website is Troy Nunes is an absolute magician. They might have to change that to Fran Brown is an absolute magician the way this is going.
Yeah, I mean, it's every week here, and this appears to be literally the weekend of the big dudes here. There's some O-linemen, there's some D-linemen. I'd say the main tie across all of it, right, Mike, is, like, these aren't just offensive linemen. These are gigantic human beings. He's brought some legit huge people to campus this week.
Yes, and, I actually did the math. So on the visitor list that we have posted on our website, allsyracuse.com, we've got 6 visitors listed, although there are 2 more that I'm working to be able to confirm publicly. But as of now, there are 6 visitors, and the total weight among those 6 visitors is 1,880 pounds. So it's a lot of beef, and it's, I think, exactly what Syracuse needs at this point, which is as much depth as they can possibly get along both lines of scrimmage.
Yeah, and that seems to be the plan. Potentially 2 secret visitors. That's fun. That's fun. We'll see if that comes out here going forward. What does that tell you about what Fran is looking for? When you look at this group here this weekend, and some of them are actually already committed. I think 3 of them are already committed. That's happened here of late. Does it tell you, do you think these are starting types? Is this legit, hey, just get as many big dudes in here because we need linemen on both sides of the ball? What is your sense of what this group tells you about what he's up to right now?
Well, I think there's both. I mean, but the one thing I've noticed from an offensive line standpoint is there's a lot of guys that are like 320, 330 pounds. So it's not just that you want to be 300 pounds. You want to be sort of well over the 300-pound mark. And then from a defensive line standpoint, it seems somewhere in the 290 to 310 range seems to be where for defensive tackles where he's looking at. So maybe it's hard to say slender when you're 290, 300 pounds, but a little bit more slender than what they're looking for in the offensive line because they want some of that twitchiness and that quickness at the defensive tackle position. So I think that's what it's telling me, but I also think it's telling me that he's looking at the current roster and he's kind of saying, I think, what some of the complaint has been amongst the fans, which is Syracuse just isn't as big as their opponents at the line of scrimmage, and that has hurt them in some capacity over the last few years. So certainly looking to fix that. I think you're probably going to have a mix of guys. Obviously, everybody can't start, but they're certainly trying to add as much depth as possible with guys that they think are potentially starting caliber. And then you have those guys, compete and see who earns a spot. And you got a mix of guys that are only going to be here for 1 year and a mix of guys who have, 2, 3, 4 years of eligibility. So some of those younger guys don't win the starting job right now. Doesn't necessarily mean that their hopes of playing are over. They still got multiple years of eligibility left. So a nice mix between the two, I think, of, guys that only have a year left, guys that have multiple years left, a lot of beef, and, hopefully multiple guys that you think could start. I think they want to try to fill it too deep that they'd feel good with either their starters or their first reserves at being the guys that are starting. And if you feel good about that, then you've got a pretty deep line.
All right, I want to hit you on some of the names that are here this weekend. One is Micah Mazuka. I still don't know how he ended up pronouncing his. He's missing a vowel in the middle, but I guess that's how he says his name. He's a transfer out of Florida, 6'5", 325. He's a Philly guy, so I can connect some dots here. What do we know about Micah, and how ready with this SEC type to land here in Syracuse?
Yeah, he played at Baylor for 3 years before going to Florida, and when he transferred from Baylor to Florida, he was a really hot commodity in the transfer portal. Florida won that battle, and he graded out as Florida's best offensive lineman last year. Now, Florida's line was not great, but he was not one of the issues for it last year. And I talked to the guy that runs allgators.com, which is the SI Fan Nation Florida version of me, so to speak, and talked to him about Micah and what type of player he was, and he confirmed the same thing, that he was the best offensive lineman they had this past season on a line that struggled basically everywhere else. And he, so he's someone who has a lot of experience at the Big 12 and the SEC level, a lot of starting experience, and I think would slide into one of those guard spots and do very, very well. He's definitely an interior guy, though, for sure.
Okay, so that's something to watch out for here. A guy that played, if I had this right, I think he was a tackle right this last year. He's visiting now, but committed earlier this week is Demetrius Weatherspoon. He's coming from Howard. He was an HBCU All-American, and he's 6'7", 335. This is a gigantic human being. What kind of get was this for Fran?
Yeah, a really good get. Now, he's from just outside of Pittsburgh, in a suburb of Pittsburgh, and Pitt was trying really hard to get him. He visited on January 3rd. He visited Pittsburgh, and actually that's the same day that he committed. What I don't know for sure is whether he was already on the visit when he committed or whether he was on his way to the visit. I don't know the exact logistics there, but Pittsburgh is, I think, still actively trying to flip him. So this visit, I think, is Syracuse's chance to sort of close the book on that, seal the deal, and say, yeah, you committed before you visited, but you knew what you were talking about. Here's the visit to sort of, slam the door on that. But he's an HBCU All-American, as you said. He's extremely talented. He's a big, big man, very physical. And I think he's got the versatility to play inside or outside because of his size and because of the way that he uses his hands. And it'll be interesting to see where he slides in there. But I think a really nice get. He also had, some other schools that were trying to pursue him as well. Some non-Power 5 FBS, and then some other FBS were taking a hard look at him as well. Mike
McAllister is with us of allsyracuse.com. And Mike, let's look at some of these defensive guys. And before we get into the guys, we still haven't heard a lot about what scheme the defense is going to be, or the offense, or any of this stuff. I think a lot of that information is still to come in many ways. This is just, we've been watching the 3-3-5 here. My guess of all these defensive tackles showing up on campus is they're planning on going back to a four-man front. Are you getting the same vibes as I am, or am I pulling that out of nothingness?
No, I think you're right. You're dead on with that. And if I had to guess, I think they're probably going to mirror some of what Georgia did with kind of a 4-2-5 base, which for those, all the numbers and the 3-3-5 and 4-2-5 and 4-3 and what does all this mean? It's essentially a 4-3, but with a nickel as your base.
Yeah.
So you've got an extra cornerback and one less linebacker. That's essentially what it is. But from a line standpoint, you have four down linemen. I think that's where all the smart money is that they're going to be running something along those lines. And the fact that they're bringing in all of these tackles, they brought in the pass rusher and Fidel Diggs, and then you combine that with what you already have, and you look at the roster, and there's a huge disparity in terms of the number of defensive tackles and the size of your defensive tackles, and that's what Fran is trying to address here. So yeah, I think it is a little bit telling in terms of what the defensive approach is going to be.
Yeah, I'd say we've all loved Kevon Darton and the story that is Kevon Darton the last couple of years, but he's not the largest guy out there. He's not the size of some of these guys that are in here. I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name, Mike, but Michael Wakocha is the best I got for you, and this guy from Tyler Community College coming in. What's his deal? His offer sheet is pretty darn good. How good of a player is he, and where do you put Syracuse's chances here?
Well, his recruitment is a little bit difficult to discern in terms of where people stand and who's really at the top, and I don't have a great feel for that at the moment, to be honest with you. But the fact that Syracuse is getting a visit, we don't really have knowledge that he's taken visits to a bunch of other schools yet. And a lot of those offers came, early in the fall or over the summer or things like that. That tells you, I think, that the fact that Syracuse offered recently and then he's visiting tells you that Syracuse has a real chance here. And I'm not really going to go the route of underestimating what Fran Brown can do based on what we've seen the last few weeks. So, I think Syracuse certainly has a good chance here. And the one thing that they can preach to these defensive tackles is, look, we don't have anyone coming back that has played in this system that is a surefire starter. As much as we like Kevon Darton, I think his story is awesome, and I still think he can play here, and I still think he can play in the new system. But is he better served as maybe your third defensive tackle, someone that's in the rotation, but you don't have to rely on as being the guy that's playing 90% of your snaps, as they seem to have done the last couple of years? I mean, I think that would be better for him. I think that would be better for Syracuse, and so I still think he can play a role. but you bring in some of these guys and say, listen, everything is open. The slate is clean for everybody, and you're going to have a very good chance to earn a starting spot, earn a lot of playing time if you come here. That's something they can preach, whereas, perhaps a place like, you look at some of his offers, a Georgia, an Oklahoma, even a Tennessee or a TCU, are they going to be able to promise the same opportunity for playing time right away that Syracuse is? And I think Syracuse probably has a leg up from that standpoint.
And he might be able to play next to a guy named Tank. Like, who doesn't like a guy named Tank on the defensive line? Tank Wilson from New Mexico State committed Monday. All I know is that his nickname is Tank. I'm sold. Like, I don't know if I need to know more than that, Mike.
I mean, you don't. But, the other thing is, he's 6'5", 300 pounds. Really athletic, and has a knack for getting into the backfield. And he had other Power 5 programs after him, Rutgers, Texas A&M, most notably. They both had official visits scheduled with him for this week, and he committed before taking those visits and canceled those visits. So, again, anytime you're going up against an SEC program that has a great NIL situation and you're beating them, I think that says something about your coaching staff and your program. So again, I think that's pretty good, and he's coming in with a lot of experience. And if they can get a couple of these other guys, and you got 3 or 4 guys in the rotation with a lot of experience and a lot of size, and if Kevon Darton goes from being one of your bigger guys to one of your smaller guys, I think that's quite a turnaround in one offseason.
Yeah, more good interior defensive linemen is never not a useful thing on a football team. Mike McAllister with us. A couple other things to hit with you, Mike. Marcellus Barnes, we've talked about this name for a while. He's in the All-American Bowl tomorrow. He'll have, a Georgia hat, an Ole Miss hat, and a Syracuse hat, a 4-star cornerback. What's your read on what he's going to do tomorrow?
I think the smart money is on Syracuse going into the announcement. I don't recall him taking official visits to those other schools. He took one to Syracuse, right before the early National Signing Day, and while he didn't sign, he had said, I'm going to make my announcement at the All-American Bowl, which I think was kind of his plan all along, and it's been relatively quiet since then, and there's been some predictions of the crystal balls and future casts and whatever the sites are calling them that have all been in Syracuse's favor, and it's sort of seemed like Syracuse has been the prevailing favorite since that official visit. So it went extremely well. Syracuse can promise the chance to start as a true freshman, and I'm not sure those other schools can promise that. So Fran Brown's been recruiting him when he was at Georgia. He has a long-standing, strong relationship with him, and you want to talk about buzz. There's already buzz around Syracuse right now with what Fran Brown has been doing, but you get someone to announce to Syracuse with Georgia and Ole Miss hats on the table at the All-American Bowl on television. That's something else that'll create a lot of buzz for you.
Yeah, it's way better. Like, you still get him. It's way better than if he just said he was coming here a few weeks ago. Like, that would be a buzz win for Fran. And go figure, if he does pick Syracuse, one of the guys he might be competing for a spot with is the last freshman to start at cornerback here, which was Deuce Chestnut. What'd you make of his return?
Kind of a cool story. I know a lot of people have said, what happened at LSU? Why did that not work out? I don't think it really matters, to be honest with you. It didn't work out. That's all you need to know. There weren't any allegations of him, doing anything off the field that was nefarious or legal issues or anything like that. So largely, I would just kind of chalk it up to something that didn't work out, whether there was a personality conflict with him and Brian Kelly or other coaches, or, whatever the case is. They didn't know how to use him. They thought he had a different skill set compared to what they want to run. Who knows what the situation was? So it didn't work out there, but there was a reason why he was highly regarded when he decided to transfer out of Syracuse and had a bunch of really high-level programs after him to come in and play for them, or throwing NIL packages at him and all those types of things. I still think he's a very talented player. I still think he has something to offer. And, I think going into this potential 4-2-5 system where maybe he's not left on an island as much as he was even when he was at Syracuse before, or even at LSU, and he can use his instincts a little bit more and kind of play an area, a little bit more of his own feel, that could actually end up benefiting him and the skill set he brings to the table. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits into that. But again, someone with a lot of starting experience, someone with starting experience at your school, New Jersey connections, all of that. I think it made a ton of sense for him to come back.
Yeah, I think we all could have done without the New Year's Eve midnight announcement, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I was literally walking upstairs to go to bed when my phone went off.
Yeah.
And that happened. I'm like, really, Deuce? Okay, fine.
That thus is the Deuce Chestnut experience. I don't know if any of us are all that surprised by that. All right, last thing, Mike. Class of 2025. Obviously, what starts going first? Quarterbacks start going first, and things around quarterbacks start happening first. I've seen you write about Malik Washington, about a guy named Quentin Murphy. What is this starting to tell you about what Fran is going after in the quarterback classes of the future?
Well, there seems to be a theme in that even though he brings in Kyle McCord, right, who is a pure pocket pro-style type of quarterback, it seems like with the quarterbacks that Syracuse is really heavily involved with in 2025, there seems to be more of a dual threat option there with some of those guys. Now, I don't know if he's married to dual threat or he's just trying to get the guy that he thinks is the most talented, and he'll tailor things from that point on in terms of the offense. So that's the biggest takeaway for me is I don't think he is limiting himself to one certain type of quarterback. He's looking for whoever is the most talented, whoever is the best player, and if that is someone who can also move around and make plays with his legs, fantastic. If it's not, then he'll deal with that as well. So I think that's the biggest takeaway that I have with it. But I also think it means that I would be pretty surprised if Syracuse didn't get a high-profile quarterback in the 2025 class.
Well, that is always a good thing. Well, Mike, fascinating times. It's not ending anytime soon. It looks like so. I'm sure we'll talk again pretty soon.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
All right, there goes Mike McAllister. Check all his stuff out. Follow his Twitter for one. Like boom, 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 stuff happening all the time. But allsyracuse.com. Allsyracuse.com, even at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. With that, we'll take a break. Little 411 in the 315 NFL edition with Tim. That's next. QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio.